12 Years Across Borders. A memoir by Lin, Chapter 7. The night before a mission. Before we begin, one note. What follows is a record of 12 years of work as a cross-border medical coordinator. It is a more not medical advice and not a treatment recommendation. If you or someone in your family is facing a similar situation, please speak with your own physician. Alright, let's begin. The call came on a Tuesday in the autumn of 2017, and I took it standing in the arrivals hall of Hongqiao Airport in Shanghai, beside a shuttered newsstand, with one hand still on the telescoping handle of my suitcase. The air inside the terminal had the particular quality of Chinese airports in that era. Overcooled at the gate, overwarm at the curb, with an overhead speaker repeating a reminder in 3 languages to watch your belongings. A driver across the concourse was holding a paper sign with somebody else's surname on it. My phone had just regained signal. It was vibrating in my palm before I had taken 10 steps past customs. It was my office in Fukuoka. My colleague's voice was pitched low, the way people speak when they are trying not to be overheard by a stranger 2 feet away. Lin-san, we have a problem. What kind? The university hospital called. They are cancelling Mr. X's admission tomorrow morning. I stopped walking. The suitcase kept rolling for another half meter and knocked gently against my ankle. Say that again. She said it again. Disclaimer, what follows is a memoir account, not medical advice. Patient and certain institutional names have been changed. Consult your physician for any treatment decision. Mr. X had walked into my life 3 months earlier through a chain of introductions that began inside J Group, the private Chinese holding company whose medical arm I had been consulting for. LJ Group is a pseudonym. As are all private companies in this book, someone in one of their affiliated businesses in Beijing had a family member with an unusual cancer. And the path from that employee to F Medical, the Japanese physician who flew into Hangzhou once a month for case reviews, ran through me. He came to the consultation room himself. That was the first thing that surprised me. Most of the cancer patients I had coordinated for by that point arrived through their families, by proxy, by file. The patient himself was often in a hospital bed somewhere, represented by a sheaf of scans and a wife's phone number. Mr. X walked in on his own 2 legs, in a well-cut jacket, with his wife on one side and his parents on the other. He was in his mid-20s, tall, recently married. His Mandarin was clean and his reasoning was orderly. When F Medical asked him a question about his treatment history, he answered in the kind of sentences a graduate student gives at a thesis defense premise, evidence, conclusion. His wife sat beside him with the steady attentiveness of someone who had decided, some weeks earlier, that her husband would survive and that she would not be the weak link in the plan. His mother was in her late 50s, with the precise posture of a retired administrator, and she watched her son talk with a pride she was not quite concealing. I have thought often about what I felt looking at him across that table. The honest answer is I felt relieved. A 20-something who looks strong, who sounds clear, who walks into a room under his own power. It is hard, as a non-physician, not to read those surfaces as prognosis. The young are supposed to heal. I know now that certain cancers run faster in young patients than in older ones. The cells divide harder. The metastases travel further. Chemotherapy response is less predictable. Genetic variants accumulate. Several oncologists later in my career told me some version of the same sentence. In young patients, this disease is often more aggressive. It is not folk wisdom. It is what the case series show. Mr. X had exactly the kind of cancer in which youth was not an advantage. It was a rare variant of a rare disease of the male reproductive system. And even the senior oncologists at two of Beijing's top tertiary hospitals had shaken their heads when they saw the pathology. His mother told me without drama that she had been told her son would die 3 separate times by 3 separate specialists. She had stopped accepting those sentences. That was why she had come to Hangzhou. The reason Mr. X ended up across a table from F Medical at all is worth a paragraph. Because without the specific arrangement that had grown up between the Japanese physician and J Group over the preceding year, the introduction would not have happened. After a clinic was shuttered in Tokyo, F Medical's calendar had opened up in a way it had never been opened before. Sometime in 2017, he began traveling to China with some regularity. At first it was rare, a single trip. Later it became a standing rhythm. Whenever he came, J Group set aside the central conference room on the executive floor of its Hangzhou headquarters and ran what the staff called consultation sessions, seminars in the morning, case reviews in the afternoon, round tables over dinner in a private dining room. The business logic behind this, as O Director explained it to me in one of the few conversations where he was candid about his reasoning, was that the credibility of the fusion cell protocol needed a physical presence. It needed a Japanese physician in the room, speaking in his own voice, so that the groups or medical staff could understand how the protocol was supposed to work, and more importantly, so that the outside observers in the room would see a Japanese physician and weight the protocol accordingly. The trips were not cosmetic. They carried real commercial weight. My role during those sessions was translator. I sat to the physician's left with a notebook and converted his Japanese into Mandarin and the room's Mandarin back into Japanese, in both directions, across a long afternoon. J Group had also assigned a Japanese speaking and house interpreter to work alongside me. A younger woman trained in Japan, efficient. She split the sessions with me and sometimes took the whole room when I was traveling. I noticed over several months a small dry envy I could not fully talk myself out of. Translators in this field ordinarily scrape their clinical background together alone, from Japanese medical journals and whatever they can extract from search engines at 1 in the morning. This new colleague was sitting in the room for every session, absorbing the protocol, the staging language, the sequence of physician questions, by proximity. She was learning by osmosis what I had spent 3 years picking up the hard way. I had nothing to hold against her for that. It was a small unfairness, not a real one, but I noticed it. Mr. X was one of the patients brought before F Medical in exactly that conference room, on one of exactly those afternoons. The J Group staff who carried his file up to the executive floor did not hand it to a specialist at a tertiary hospital. She handed it to a Japanese visitor who had 3 days in Hangzhou and a seat at a long table. F Medical reviewed the imaging the next morning in a consultation room with the blinds half drawn and a light box on the side wall. He was a careful man. He spent a long time with each film. He drew small diagrams on a notepad. He asked Mr. X specific questions about the sequence of prior treatments, the dates of each cycle, the dosages, the reported side effects. He did not rush. Then he said, in the Japanese physician way of speaking that I had by then spent 3 years learning to translate, or in the standard form of this disease, the treatment logic is clear. Surgical resection followed by adjuvant chemotherapy. Any competent Japanese hospital can do this. The family's face is open. However, F. Medical continued. Your son's case is the variant form. The complexity is higher. In simple presentations, the treatment is straightforward. In complex presentations, it may not be possible to proceed. We would need to see him in person with our own imaging before we could make that judgment. The sentence that mattered to me was it may not be possible to proceed. In the register F Medical used, that was a red flag with the pin already pulled. Translated honestly, it meant I do not have confidence in this case. I had sat through hundreds of consultations by then. I knew his grammar. What the family heard was different. They heard the first half of the sentence. They heard that Japan had a treatment logic, that surgery and chemotherapy were within reach, that complex cases could be handled. The second half, the hedge, the warning slid past them. This was not stupidity. It was not even optimism, exactly. It was the physics of having been refused many times in a row. When you have heard no from the 10 best hospitals in your own country, and a foreign physician says something that contains any word, yes, anywhere inside it, that word expands to fill the entire sentence. I understood my job in that moment. My job was to walk the family back through F Medical's actual meaning. I said as gently as I could manage that the DOS reservation was real, that we should prepare for the possibility that even Japan would not be able to accept the case, that the trip would require contingency plans. Mr. X's mother nodded at me the way people nod when they are being polite and not listening. Her son had walked into the room. Her son was tall and healthy looking. Her son was going to leave. I have done this work for more than a decade now, and I still do not know how to close this gap. Medical hope delivered across a language barrier and a cultural one inflates on the way over. The translator is not a bridge so much as a pressure valve that does not quite hold. The family decided to try Japan. Even one chance in 100, his mother said in the consultation room. We will take it, my colleague, and I spent the next several weeks building the case file. All of Mr. X's records, pathology reports, imaging, the sequence of his prior treatments, the Beijing physician's notes, the reasons the variant form was considered difficult translated into Japanese and assembled into a single document. We did not redact. In cross-border medical coordination, the temptation is always to soften the file, to present the patient's situation in a way that makes acceptance more likely. I learned early to resist this. A hospital that accepts a case on incomplete information and then discovers the full picture mid-treatment becomes a hostile institution very fast. The only long-term protection in this work is radical disclosure. We sent the file first to the Cancer Institute Hospital of the Japanese Foundation for Cancer Research, which in Japanese medical circles is referred to simply as Ariake and occupies roughly the position that Memorial Sloan Kettering occupies in New York. The response came back within a week. It was cordis and it was absolute. We have reviewed the materials. Given that the patient is currently under treatment in China, we do not believe we can offer a plan superior to the one he's receiving. We recommend that he continue treatment in his home country. This is the most polite refusal a Japanese institution knows how to write. Translated into its operational meanings, we cannot do better than what he already has, which is to say, we also cannot treat this. I passed the message to the family. Mr. X's mother was silent for a long moment on the phone. Then she said, "Please try the next one." The second hospital was Juntendo, through a coordinator friend with internal connections. The file went in. 3 weeks passed. Each time I followed up, I received one of the standard phrases that Japanese institutions deploy when a decision is being deferred under evaluation. The professor is reviewing. The departmental conference has not yet been scheduled. 3 weeks later, the formal reply arrived with the same shape. This case can be managed in China. We cannot offer a superior alternative. I put down the phone in my Fukuoka office and sat for a while without doing anything. 2 of the best oncology hospitals in Japan had declined the case within a month. That was not noise. That was signal. It meant that inside the Japanese standard system, this particular variant did not have a decisive answer. But a coordinator's job on days like that one is not to publish the signal. It is to keep looking. The third hospital was a national university hospital in Kyushu, one of the old imperial flagships in Western Japan. I went to them directly. By 2017, my company had obtained designation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a guarantor to Organization for Medical Visa Applicants, a bureaucratic status that allowed us to sponsor overseas patients for travel to Japan for treatment. It is not a glamorous credential, but it opens doors. When a coordinator approaches a Japanese university hospital's international office with that designation, the conversation begins with the door open rather than closed. I submitted the full file to the hospital's international office. The case was routed to an outpatient physician, not senior, reasonably young. I will call him Dr. Yu. Both the hospital and individual physicians are anonymized here. Dr. Yu's response was unusually fast and unusually clear. This case can be handled at our institution. Please arrange for the patient and family to travel to Fukuoka for an in-person consultation, after which we will schedule admission and surgery. I read the email twice. Then I called Mr. X's mother. I have replayed that phone call many times in the intervening years. She was in Beijing, early evening her time. When I told her the news, she cried. Not the theatrical cry of someone performing gratitude for a business associate. The small, exhausted cry of a woman who had been told no in a dozen waiting rooms in 2 countries and had finally been told yes. The family booked flights the next day. They flew into Fukuoka within a week. The in-person consultation happened at Kyushu on a Thursday. Dr. Liu was Cody's thorough, unhurried. He reviewed the imaging once more, asked his questions, performed the standard physical workup. Then, and I want to be precise about what he said, turned to the parents and said, "There is no problem. We will accept him." He followed with specifics: admission date, preoperative evaluation, surgery scheduled for roughly 2 weeks out, instructions on dietary medication preparation. There is no problem. We'll accept him. For the parents of a young man who had been refused by Ariek, refused by Jantendo, refused by Beijing. This sentence, delivered in person by a physician at a national university hospital, was not a statement. It was an oath. The family rented a serviced apartment in the Omadashi neighborhood, 3 train stops from the hospital, for under 100,000 a month, roughly 900 riyals, at the late 28017 rate, utilities, furniture and kitchenware included. For them was a rounding error. Mr. X's mother stocked the refrigerator. She arranged the sheets on the bed twice, because the first attempt did not satisfy her. She intended to live in that apartment for the 6 months that treatment arc was expected to run. No, she told me in the kitchen of that apartment on the afternoon before her son's admission. No, there is finally hope. Looking back, that afternoon was the most optimistic and the most wrong I have ever been in this work. The admission was scheduled for Wednesday morning. I was in Shanghai on the Tuesday on a separate errand for J Group, reviewing paperwork with O Director. O Director is the pseudonym I have used throughout this book for the Chinese executive whose orbit I spent 2 years inside. I had planned to fly back to Fukuoka on Tuesday night and be at the hospital with the family in the morning. I walked out of arrivals at Hongqiao into that specific airport and my phone rang. Lin-san, we have a problem. The university hospital called. They are cancelling Mr. X's admission tomorrow morning. A long silence on my end. Say that again. The international office called. They said the internal departmental conference met this afternoon. They said the case is more complex than they initially assessed. They said they cannot proceed. They are asking us to find another institution. Who called? The international office. Not Dr. Yu. Does the family know? Not yet. I wanted to ask you first. I looked up at the terminal's coffered ceiling for a moment. The driver with the wrong surname sign was being waved over by his passenger. An announcement in Mandarin was asking someone to please return to their gate. The world was in motion in the way airport worlds always are. Don't tell them yet, I said. I'm flying back tonight. I'll tell them in person tomorrow morning. I did not sleep on the flight. What I did for 4 hours was compose, rehearse, and discard different versions of the sentence I was going to have to say the next morning. The family had flown from Beijing. They had signed a lease. The refrigerator was full. The mother had arranged the sheets twice. The English phrase "from heaven to hell" is one I had encountered in subtitled films and never used in a sentence of my own. On that flight, in row 14 of an ANA 737, I understood it for the first time. I spent the next several weeks trying to reconstruct what had happened inside the hospital on that Tuesday afternoon. I spoke to physician friends elsewhere in the system. I pieced it together in fragments. Dr. Yu had not lied. He was an outpatient level physician with relatively limited operative experience in this variant. When he saw the imaging and met the patient, he made a judgment within the envelope of his own practice. He believed genuinely that the case could be done. The promise he made in the consultation room was his actual belief at the moment he made it. What he did not control was the mechanism that every Japanese university hospital runs before complex admissions, an internal multidisciplinary conference, typically convened a few days before the scheduled procedure, attended by the surgical team, anesthesia pathology, radiology, medical oncology, nursing leadership, and often a senior department chair. Every relevant service reviews the case, top to bottom, and each department can object. At that conference, the objections came in a recognizable order. We have limited institutional experience with this variant. The anatomical location, the staging, and the pathological subtype together produce a high risk of post-operative complications. Even with a successful resection, our post-operative treatment options for this specific variant are narrow. And then the sentence that I have since heard described to me in various paraphrases as the decisive one: this is an overseas patient. There is no Japanese national health insurance coverage. If a poor outcome occurs, the allocation of institutional responsibility is unclear. That last sentence is the one Anglo-American readers often find hardest to place. It sounds venal. In that room, with that mother, it was Japanese institutional medicine operates inside a culture in which responsibility, once assumed, cannot easily be distributed, and in which the institution, not the individual physician, bears the legal and reputational consequence of a bad outcome. A case with unusual pathology and unusual patient, and no domestic insurance backstop, is a case in which the institution has maximum exposure and minimum ability to absorb the hit. The ethic of the conference is not, can we help this patient? The ethic is, can we carry this case with full responsibility in the worst scenario? On that Tuesday, the conference's answer was no. The decision was communicated to the family not by Dr. Yu, who had made the original promise, but by the international office. A layer of bureaucratic insulation that allowed Dr. Yu to avoid facing the mother. This is also a mechanism. It protects the individual at the expense of the collective. The individual physician does not have to apologize directly. The institution absorbs the wound. From the inside, this is risk management. From the outside, from the rented apartment in Omodashi with the stocked refrigerator, it is a catastrophe. I met the family the next morning in the meeting room at my office, not at their apartment. I did not want the news delivered in the rooms where they had been arranging their lives for a stay that was no longer going to happen. They sat in a row across from me, Miss X in the center. His wife on one side, his parents on the other. His mother's face was bright. She had brought a notebook. I believe she thought we were meeting to review the admission checklist. I took one breath and I swore I'd rehearsed on the plane. The hospital called last night. After their internal conference, they have decided they cannot proceed with the case. Tomorrow's admission is cancelled. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever sat inside. Miss X's face drained. His wife lowered her head. His father opened his mouth, then closed it without sound. His mother began to cry. It was not a quiet cry. It came from the bottom of her chest. She said through it, how? Yesterday they said yes. Yesterday they said there was no problem. How does it become no today? We flew here. We rented the apartment. We prepared everything. How can they do this? Aren't the Japanese supposed to be the careful ones? How can this happen? I did not have an answer. I wanted an answer more than she did. I had been the one who told her 48 hours earlier that there was finally hope. What I watched happen across that conference table was the collapse of a specific image. She had boarded her flight in Beijing holding a belief that Japanese medicine was precise, reliable, and competent. That belief disintegrated in that room. I could see it go. I could not stop it. I could not defend Japan or Kyushu or Dr. Yu. I sat on the other side of the table and I did not speak, because nothing I could say would have improved the moment. The cleanup phase of the case took 6 weeks. After repeated back and forth with the international office, the hospital agreed to host a formal apology meeting. I want to note where this meeting occurred, not in my office, not at a neutral location, but in a conference room on the first floor of the university hospital itself. The hospital requested that the family come to them. The apologizers would not travel. The apologized were asked to walk into the institution that had just refused them. That detail alone sat poorly with me. The family members who attended were Mr. X himself and his mother. His father could not come, for reasons I never fully understood at the time, some combination of work and health. So mother and son entered the room alone to receive the apology for a surgery that 24 hours later was to have been the reason the entire family was in Japan sen. On the hospital's side, a mid-level departmental representative, the head of the international office, not the vice director. Not anyone from the senior administration. Dr. Yu did not attend. The meeting unfolded in the way these meetings unfold in Japan. A deep bow, formal language of regret, an acknowledgement of insufficiency in the internal review process, a commitment to improve. I had translated ceremonies like this before in other contexts. I knew the shape. The sentence that I did not know how to translate came at the end. Regarding Mr. X's ongoing treatment, we can only recommend that you seek another institution. I translated it. I watched Mr. X's mother hear it. What I saw in her face was not anger. Anger had already passed. What I saw was resignation. The particular resignation of a person who has just understood, finally, that no amount of protest will change the outcome, because the outcome is correct on its own terms. There was no hope at this institution. Her grief was not with the decision. Her grief was with the loss of the story in which the decision had ever been otherwise. There was no material compensation. The airfare was not refunded. The apartment's early termination fee was not absorbed. The mother's preparation, the father's absence, the son's silency, none of it was balanced by anything the hospital offered. The meeting was a ritual of apology without remedy. On the way out of the building, she walked beside me. She was not crying. She said in an even voice, "Oh, I understand now, Lin-san. Japanese people apologize very sincerely, but they do not solve the problem." I have not forgotten that sentence. I want to pause here on a subject the Chinese and Japanese versions of this chapters treat more briefly, because Anglo-American readers often misunderstand how money works in Japanese hospital care for overseas patients. Overseas patients in Japan cannot use Japanese national health insurance. Every charge is self-pay. On top of that, most major hospitals apply an overseas patient markup of 150% to 300% above domestic list prices. This is legal and, within the industry, conventional. A single cycle of a common taxane or platinum-based chemotherapy regimen, which in Taiwan under national insurance might cost a patient a few hundred US dollars out of pocket, can run 200 cells and about 18 cells and L at 17 rates per cycle for an overseas patient in Japan. An immune checkpoint inhibitor like nivolumab or pembrolizumab at self-pay rates runs a 500,000 to EU 600,000, roughly 4,500 to 5,100 per infusion, with a standard course of 4 to 6 infusions pushing total drug costs above 10,000 90s or 1,000. That is drug cost only. Hospitalization, imaging operating room time, and nursing are separate line items. These are not illustrative numbers. These are numbers my company has processed, invoice by invoice. Let me make this concrete with a second patient. I will call him Mr. S.S., a different case, a different year, gastric cancer at Ariake, under one of their most senior surgeons. Soon again, the surgical fee alone for a gastrectomy came in between 10,000 and 15,000, roughly 90,000 to 135,000. The same operation performed in Taiwan would have cost on the order of 2,000 equivalent, about an order of magnitude less. Post-operative inpatient chemotherapy admissions ran 1,000 to 1,900 to 18,000 per cycle. The operation itself appeared to go well. Preoperative lymph node biopsy had been clean. The surgeon had proceeded on that basis. The final post-operative pathology showed residual microscopic disease. 3 years later, Mr. S's cancer returned, and he died. 15 million yen for the surgery, 2 million yen per chemo cycle. A family savings account emptied. 3 more years of life. That is one honest accounting of what cross-border medical care sometimes buys. In Mr. X's case, Kyushu had estimated the surgery plus adjuvant chemotherapy package at 20,000 or 30,000, roughly 130,000 to 70,000 at the 2017 exchange rate. That estimate was for a treatment plan with, by the university's own subsequent admission, uncertain prospects of success. When the conference declined the case, the family did not spend that money. They lost apartment fees, airfare, and the dignity of the decision being made at the right time. But they kept the 20,000. I could not say this to Mr. X's mother in the conference room. It would have been monstrous. But the thought has not left me if Kyushu had proceeded, and the case had gone the way the senior physicians at that conference feared it would go. The family would have absorbed a financial collapse on top of their son's death. The refusal, delivered at the worst possible moment, in the worst possible manner, may have preserved the family's long financial survival at the cost of 1 month of dignity. Japanese institutional medicine protected itself by refusing the case. In doing so, it also by accident and not by design protected the family from something worse. This is not a defense of how it was done. It is a no I have been unable to discard. The family did not go home. We will try again, his mother said. Within a week we had 2 parallel applications running. One to a Fukuoka General Hospital with a reputation in male urological oncology, which I will call G Hospital. The other to Tokyo Women's Medical University Hospital, which had a research group working on rare variants in this disease family. G Hospital received the file. The attending physician in clinic spent a long time with the imaging. He asked many questions. He was serious in a way that reminded me of the physician who had seen us at the very beginning of the process in Hongqiao. At the end of the consultation, he said, "Let me discuss this internally. We will respond shortly." Another conference. I understood by then what the word meant. The formal letter arrived several days later. It was courteous and unambiguous. G Hospital would not be able to accept the case. When I opened that letter, I noticed something about myself that surprised me. I was not shaken. The Kyushu experience had installed in me a kind of protective numbness around the phrase formal institutional refusal. I exhaled and I called the family that left Tokyo Women's. I reached out through a contact and F Medical wrote an introduction letter. In Japanese institutional medicine, that small step carries weight disproportionate to its size. A file that arrives with an introduction from a known physician is read differently from a file that arrives cold. The Tokyo hospital agreed to an in-person consultation. The family flew to Tokyo. They rented a short-term apartment near the hospital. I flew up to attend the meeting. The physician at Tokyo Women spent longer with Mr. X imaging than any previous physician had. He asked more detailed questions than any previous physician had. So detailed that Mr. X himself had to leaf through his own medical records to answer. The consultation ran past its scheduled time. At the end, the physician sat back, folded his hands, and said, "I understand your feelings and I respect them. I will speak to you honestly. At this point, we cannot offer a treatment plan that improves on what your son is already receiving in China. The Chinese specialists who have evaluated him are already at the highest level. There is no special method we have here that would change that assessment. I recommend, for your son's sake and for your family's, that he receive care at home, in the medical system he knows, among his own language. In 13 years of doing this work, this was the most honest refusal I have ever heard. No evasion, no deflection, no institutional language. Just we also cannot do this. Go home." Mr. X did not speak during the entire consultation. His wife held his hand. When we walked out of the lobby onto the Tokyo sidewalk, the sky was clear and the light was hard and white. I walked a few steps behind the family. His mother was supporting her son at the elbow, and I watched the two of their backs move together down the pavement. That was the heaviest walk I have taken in this job. The family went home to Beijing. Our communications thinned. This is a pattern in the work. When a case does not result in treatment, families rarely want to stay in contact with the coordinator. It is not anger. It is that the coordinator's voice afterward is indexed to the worst period of their lives. They do not wish to revisit it. I did not reach out either. Roughly a year later, my office phone rang. It was Mr. X's father. His voice was lower than I remembered, rough and tired in a way that has already arrived at calm. He was not crying. He was past crying. "Lin-san, I wanted to let you know. Our son. He passed last month." I held the phone and did not speak for some seconds. He went peacefully. Until the end, he kept saying thank you to you. He knew you had done everything you could. My tears arrived without my consent. He gave me a moment. Then he said, "There is one thing I do not understand. Japan is such an advanced country. How could something like this happen?" I had no answer. I said the only thing I had, which was that I was sorry, that I had failed them. "It was not your failure, Lin-san. I know you tried. It was Japan that disappointed us." After he hung up, I sat in my office for a long time. The window looked out over central Fukuoka. It was raining. The roofs of the buildings across the street had gone black with wet. A young man in his 20s, newly married, who had walked into my consultation room under his own power in the autumn. In less than 2 years gone. The Kyushu case damaged something in me more thoroughly than the A-clinic closure the year before. The A-clinic closure is covered in chapter 4 of this book. A-clinic is, as throughout, a pseudonym. The A-clinic situation had been triggered by an external regulatory action, a raid from outside the medical system, not a failure within it. Kyushu was different. Kyushu was the system operating exactly as its own rules required. Every procedure functioned. The internal conference convened, reviewed, and decided. The hospital protected itself in the manner it was designed to protect itself. And the patient's family, at the end of those procedures, was standing on the sidewalk outside the institution with their lives rearranged for no return. Afterward, my criteria for selecting a hospital changed permanently. Not reputation, not rankings, not the name on the building. The only questions I ask now are these. How many cases of this specific variant has this institution actually treated? How many of those operations has the specific surgeon personally performed? What is the institutional track record when an internal conference overturns an initial acceptance? Do they have a plan B, or do they simply decline? Track record, track record, track record. Everything else is marketing. The case also changed how I communicate with families. Mr. X's family had handed their judgment to me, to F Medical, to Kyushu. You are the experts. We will do what you say. Under ordinary conditions, this is a functional trust. When the system misfires, however, a family that has delegated its entire analytical function has no ground to stand on. They cannot argue back. They cannot evaluate the refusal. They cannot check the next proposal. I now say at the beginning of every new case, I will do everything I can to help you. And I need you to learn a little of the medicine yourself. Not enough to be a doctor. Enough to understand the general direction of what a physician is telling you and to know when to ask a follow-up question. Outsourcing every decision to another party is a dangerous posture in a system that can fail. It's not a scolding, it is a seawall. And there is a third thing. Before Mr. X, I believed the coordinator's job was to find the treatment. I treated each case as a logistics problem with an available solution somewhere on the map. After Mr. X, I understood that the coordinator's job sometimes is to refuse the case at the source on behalf of the family. When the likely shape of the story is already visible, I now turn patients away. Specifically patients who can no longer walk, who cannot eat, who are in continuous pain. I do not recommend that such patients travel to Japan. The long flight, the transfer of records, the wait, the unfamiliar language, the unfamiliar food, these alone are secondary traumas for a weakened body. If the treatment does not succeed, the patient's final period is then spent in a foreign hospital room, in the hands of physicians they do not know, in a country's warmth cannot reach them. I tell those families, think carefully. If you want to attempt it, we will attempt it. But if the attempt does not succeed, what will have been spent is money, time, and your family members' last good weeks. The person who pays the highest price, if this fails, is the patient in the final quality of their time. In the last several years, I have turned away more patients than I have accepted. Inside the cross-border medical industry, this is an unusual practice. It costs me revenue every month. It is what Mr. X taught me at the price of his own life. Refusal sometimes is the form help takes. I can still see him sitting on the sofa in my office in Hongqiao, explaining his case with the careful logic of a young graduate student. Tall, thin, bright, articulate. I think about what I would have needed to say to him on that afternoon to change the outcome. I think about whether a more experienced coordinator, a more careful one, a braver one, would have said to the family in Hongqiao, I recommend you do not come to Japan. I did not have that experience then. I did not have that courage. I did not have that clarity I do now. Too late for him. Hope in this trade is the most dangerous drug in the cabinet. Administered correctly, it saves lives. Administered incorrectly, it wounds deeper than honest despair would have. Mr. X's family was injured by a dose of Japanese medical hope delivered carelessly by the system I work within. I try now to ration it more carefully. I am not always successful. The rain over Fukuoka had slowed by the time I got up from the desk. It was still falling on the building across the street, but more lightly, in the even way it falls in this city in the late autumn. Note this chapter recounts the author's experience as a coordinator and does not evaluate the clinical judgment of any named or anonymized institution. All treatment decisions should be made in consultation with a qualified physician. Certain names, affiliations, and identifying details have been altered to protect patient and family privacy. That is the end of this chapter. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next one.